Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen von Sychowski, President of the Vancouver and District Labour Council. And on behalf of the BC Federation of Labour, the Business Council of BC, and WorkSafeBC, I welcome you to our annual National Day of Mourning ceremony, one of more than 30 which are taking place across the province. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we're holding this event on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish people, including the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. We co-host this ceremony every year to underscore the importance of participation of each stakeholder in ensuring the safest and healthiest workplaces in BC. Workers, employers, and the Workers' Compensation Board, as well as the government, have a role to play. I've attended several Day of Mourning ceremonies over the year and pleased to have the opportunity to MC one for the first time. I spent a fair bit of time mulling over what I was going to say in the brief time that I have today before I introduce the speakers. And then I was helped somewhat accidentally by a young worker I was speaking to about the Day of Mourning, about what it means, why we do it. And I said to her, do you know that in 2017, there were 198 worker deaths reported? And she said, wow, is that normal? Is that more than normal? I said I didn't know offhand if that was more than normal, but I kept thinking about that question as I continued with my day and sat down to write my notes for this event. Is that more than normal? There's a lot to unpack in that question. After all, how did we get to a place where we consider a particular number of worker deaths to be normal? And if it is normal, how can we accept that continuing to be the case? So we have a lot of work to do together in order to change people's thinking so that we don't have a situation where we consider any number of worker fatalities to be normal, so that we can continue to strive to ensure that the new normal and the only one that we should consider acceptable is 0 worker deaths per year. One big step towards this is to ensure that every worker knows their rights in the workplace and every employer adheres to their obligations as well. Telling people to be careful isn't enough, and we need to build a safety culture in our workplaces through education and enforcement. But workplace health and safety doesn't end with eliminating serious injuries and fatalities. Another area which is being given increased attention and needs even more is the issue of workplace violence and harassment. That's why the labor movement's message for this Day of Mourning is workplace violence, not part of the job. Many workers face violence and harassment at work. This is preventable and should never be accepted. It can include physical assault, attacks, threatening behavior, verbal or written threats, harassment, or verbal abuse. It can happen once, or it can become a pattern, but it's never okay. So let's challenge it when we see it. Let's lead by example and make sure that we have workplaces that are safe and healthy, both physically and psychologically. After all, today we mourn for the dead, but we also recommit ourselves to fight for the living. I want to take a moment to acknowledge that today, for the 3rd year, in over 145 schools across the province, students this year in over 145 schools across the province, students are observing the Day of Mourning. That's thanks to a partnership between the Labour Heritage Centre, the BC Teachers Federation, QPBC, the BC Federation of Labour, BC Principals and Vice Principals Association, BC Schools Trustees Association, and WCB. It's a fantastic initiative and an opportunity to educate young people who have just entered the workforce or maybe will be soon, and make sure that they know about this important day and what it stands for and will be safe at the job. Initiatives like this one carry on the work that the labor movement began when it created the Day of Mourning across Canada in 1984. And since that time, it's been designated municipally, provincially, and federally as a day of remembrance for workers killed and injured on the job. Now it's time to hear from our speakers. Our first speaker today is the Honourable Harry Bains, Minister of Labour. Harry was re-elected MLA in Surrey-Newton in May of 2017 and was first elected back in 2005. He is now the Minister of Labour, but previously served as official opposition spokesperson for forests, lands, and natural resource operations, and he's been active in Surrey for many years, and previously served 15 years as an elected officer of Steelworkers IWA Canada, Local 2171. Please welcome Harry Bains.
Thank you, Stephen, and good morning. And thank you for the invitation for me to come and observe this National Day of Mourning with you. And I want to thank all of you for coming and joining in this very, very important day. And keep on reminding ourselves that today and every day after this, that we continue to take actions and whatever it takes to ensure that our fellow workers enjoy the best health and safety and protection at workplaces. And I want to first acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, including the Musqueam Indian Band, Squamish Nation, and Tsleil-Waututh, where we are gathered here today. Just remember, every day around this province, workers get up, prepare to go to work. They pack their lunches, say goodbye, and promise to finish the conversation or to help with chores when they get home. In 2017, 158 of those workers who left with a promise to come back home never made it back home. None of them, nor their loved ones, could have imagined that these would be their final moments together. None of them could have foreseen that a workplace incident would steal their future. And Stephen and I agree, it's never is normal. Never is normal when someone dies at workplace. Never it is normal when they are injured seriously at workplace. And that's why we are here today, to remember and mourn those who lost to workplace incidents and occupational diseases, and those who live and whose lives have been forever changed as a result. And there are reminders all around us. Where we stand here today, we can see the Ironworker Memorial, named for 19 workers that died building in 1958. Bental 4, just down the street, in 1981. Scaffolding collapsed, and 4 workers lost their lives. And just on the other side of this plaza, a stunt woman was killed just last year while filming a movie. It's a reminder to all of us that accidents happen across the street and across the province. Today we are here also to remember 3 farm workers who died in a car accident or van accident when they were on the way to work near Abbotsford in 2007. 4 mill workers in Burns Lake and Prince George who died due to mill explosions in 2012. We remember 3 arena workers in Fernie just last year who died doing their job. Frustrating part, and as sad as this is, the frustration that build around this is that these injuries and losses are preventable. They do not have to happen, and they shouldn't. It is unacceptable because even one death is one too many. And maybe it seems that we can't do anything. But remember, and today we are committing again, and every day after today, that we can and we must. As Minister of Labour, I'm firmly committed to making workplaces the safest workplaces in the country. That means focusing on prevention and strong enforcement programs, especially those sectors that have higher rate of injuries, like construction and healthcare. Workers should never be exposed to dangerous situations or substances without proper training, safety precautions, and equipment. Anything less is simply unacceptable, because all workers deserve to go home at the end of their shift safe and healthy. And worker safety is also about support for those who have been injured on the job, who have become sick because of their work. It's about treating them with respect and dignity, ensuring they get the care they need to recover and return to work, and to get the assistance they need if they can't return to work. And believe me, we have a lot of work to do in this area, and we're already starting to take actions. My direction to WorkSafeBC has been to focus on prevention and enforcement, but also on stronger support for injured workers and sick workers. And I'm grateful for the work that they have undertaken since Ralph McGinn, our new chair, assumed the position of board chair this last December. There's a renewed vigor towards helping me reach my vision of BC becoming the safest jurisdiction for workers in Canada, towards renewal, reflection, reviews of how they can do better at increasing worker health and safety. But still, we saw an unusual high number of workplace deaths across this province last month. And I'm thankful that the board is taking action, reaching out to the employer to remind them of their responsibilities and accountability to workplace safety, to remind them to be vigilant and focus on prevention. Hopefully, it is some comfort to those who have lost loved ones that these tragedies often lead to changes that improve workplace safety, changes that save lives and continue to inspire people to do what we can to improve working conditions for people in this province. For example, last year, the deaths of 3 workers in Fernie made painfully clear the need for increased inspections and changes to aging equipment in arenas. The deaths of those 3 farm workers shone a spotlight on unacceptable working conditions in the agriculture industry and led to several changes to improve worker safety, like bringing in random roadside safety checks on vehicles used to transport farm workers. These are examples of tools we can use for a safer workplace. And our government is continued. It's committed to support workers and safety through education as well, ensuring workers know their rights to refuse unsafe work. Workers need to know how to identify and recognize unsafe working conditions, because we shouldn't have to wait for tragedy to happen before we take our workplace safe, before we make our workplaces safe or we change laws. And though we are making improvements to increase safety precautions, the work is never done. We must all work together to ensure BC families can rely on safe workplaces. So today, serve as a tragic reminder of the need to be vigilant in our efforts to keep workers in all sectors safe. So on my behalf and my colleagues in Victoria and government, I offer my sympathies to those who continue to suffer from illness or injury, and to those who have lost loved ones in workplaces. And I wish to acknowledge Jack and Rosemarie for their courage to come here and share their very personal experiences, who will be speaking to you in a few minutes. Remember, we can't change what has happened, but we can learn from our past. Thank you very much. Let's keep on working, looking out for each other until we know that every worker who goes to work come home in the same shape that they went to work with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Bains, for those words. Our next speaker is Ralph McGinn, Chair and Public Interest Representative, for WorkSafe Board of Directors. Ralph was appointed to the WorkSafeBC Board of Directors in December of 2017. Previously, he served as the chair of AgSafe, BC's Agricultural Safety Association, and as president and CEO of WorkSafeBC from 1998 to 2003. Please welcome Ralph McGinn.
Thank you, Stephen. On behalf of the Board of Directors and everyone at WorkSafe, I want to thank you for joining us here today. I feel privileged to be part of this day of mourning ceremony, as together we pay our respects to the men and women who have lost their lives due to work-related incidents and occupational diseases. I'd like to acknowledge the people who have lost loved ones, including those who are here today. Thank you for your courage in the face of your pain and sorrow. You are a powerful reminder of why we must remain committed to workplace health and safety. The 158 British Columbians who died last year, and as well all of those who have ever died in the workplace as a result of work-related incidents. We know that work-related injuries, illnesses, and deaths are preventable. This ceremony adds, as well as those that are occurring elsewhere around the province, add meaning and urgency to that fact. I was honored a few months ago to be appointed as the new chair of WorkSafe. I've spent more than 30 years now in occupational health and safety and have been fortunate to work with experts from around the world. I've learned over that period that the key to maintaining healthy and safety workplaces is collaboration and shared responsibility. Employers, workers, unions, industry associations, WorkSafeBC, and other stakeholders, we all have a part to play in this important mission. Today should remind us that workplace health and safety is a right and should be a top priority. Today should remind us that we all can do something every single day to protect each other. Every day we have the opportunity to educate others about health and safety, rights and responsibilities. Employers have the responsibility to provide a health and safety workplace. Workers have the right to expect a health and safety workplace, to be properly trained, and to refuse unsafe work. These messages need to be ingrained in everyone's psyche. It's especially important for young workers to hear these messages. Traditionally, young workers are at higher risk of injury. You'll hear more about this from two of our speakers later in the program. Jack Thomas, who was seriously injured as a young worker, and Rosemarie Lachnit, whose 20-year-old son died working on a construction site in 2005. Last year, 6 young workers aged 15 to 24 died on the job. 3 of these were as a result of motor vehicle accidents, the #1 cause of traumatic workplace deaths. We can also look for ways to make our workplaces healthier and safer. 25 years ago, the lost time injury rate in British Columbia was around 6.5%. Today, it's just hovering above 2%. So that's a marvelous improvement. But while the injury rate has reduced, those who lose their lives on the workplace haven't really changed. 25 years ago, the number was somewhere between 140 and 180, and today it's the same and has been for every period in the last 25 years. So we haven't been able to do anything about the deaths that occur on the work sites. We can and must do better. An average of 3 people died per week last year as a result of traumatic injuries or occupational diseases. That's really unacceptable. Even 1 death is unacceptable. Occupational diseases remain the leading cause of death to workers in British Columbia. It took 87 lives last year. Most of those workers died from asbestos-related diseases, and many from exposures that occurred 30 to 40 years ago. Right now, the #1 cause of asbestos exposure is the disturbance of asbestos-containing materials during demolitions and renovations. As well, there were too many tragedies in high-risk industries. These are industries with a high risk of serious workplace injury and a significant contribution to the overall provincial serious injury rate. Last year, traumatic injuries and occupational diseases took the life of 50 construction workers, 41 people in manufacturing, and 10 people in the forestry sector. It's also horrific that there were triple fatalities at 2 BC workplaces last year. You may recall that 3 workers in Was were killed in April after a logging train derailment, and of course the 3 workers in Fernie that the minister mentioned died in October after an ammonia leak in an ice rink. We all have the power, the knowledge, and the will to prevent workplace deaths. Everyone who lost their lives as a result of their work, we owe to them and to their loved ones whose lives have been changed forever. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGinn. Our third speaker this morning is Greg D'Avignon, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Business Council of British Columbia. The Business Council of BC is a 250-member organization which represents the province's leading businesses in every sector of the economy. Previously, Mr. D'Avignon was President of Western Canada and Canada's National Brewers Association and has previously served the Prime Minister of Canada, Minister of National Defence, and Minister of Justice. He's active in his community and serves on a variety of for-profit and not-for-profit boards. Please welcome Mr. D'Avignon.
Well, thank you, Stephen, and thank you. It's a privilege to be here today on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh, and also on behalf of the members of the Business Council of British Columbia. As Stephen said, 250 of the leading companies in every sector of the economy. Today's day of mourning ceremony is important for all of us. It's an opportunity to reflect, as Ralph said, on what has happened, but more importantly, to commit on what we can do together. This is the 21st ceremony that the Business Council has co-hosted with WorkSafeBC and the BC Federation of Labour. It's a reminder of the opportunity for us to work together to make a difference, and we still have more work to do. It depends on all of us as organizations, as labor unions, as government, and as individuals here gathered today to commit ourselves to eliminating work-safe injury and death. Our members employ more than 250,000 British Columbians across the province in every sector of BC's economy. And across the board, our members view and actively work to ensure workplace safety is their #1 priority. The goal is simple. Everyone goes home safe each and every day. And we all share the responsibility of doing everything we can to achieve this goal. I'd like to also acknowledge, as been mentioned earlier, Jack Thomas, who's with us today, and Rosemarie Lachnit for their courage and their ability to remind people of the real families and individuals behind the statistics you've heard this morning. This impacts lives and families forever. And it's our ability to try to stop that. We have an ability to share proper training, to act when we see risk, to speak up when we see unsafe practices or situations, and to prevent a fellow worker from injury or worse. I'd like to also acknowledge the Honourable Harry Bains, Minister of Labour, for being here today and his leadership for many, many years on workplace safety. And thank you as well to Ralph and the entire team at WorkSafeBC, one of the finest health and worker safety organizations in the country. I'm pleased to join as well my colleague Irene and the BC Federation of Labour, who, as I said earlier, have been our partners in hosting this event since 1997. The day of mourning ceremony brings together employers, labour, government, and all of us, in good weather and in bad, to remember those that were injured and as a consequence have had to live with the consequences of either an unsafe workplace or poor decisions by the employer or employee. We have the ability to improve workplace safety, training, the environments and processes we all use every day, and ensure employee awareness and employer awareness, and change the behaviors that ensure everyone goes home safely. On behalf of our members, I'd like to express our deepest sympathies to all of the families who have experienced the unthinkable loss of a loved one in a work-related event, and to all those who have experienced a work-related injury or illness. I'm personally reminded of this as my two boys come home from school this weekend and start summer jobs next week. Teenagers, first new jobs, will they receive the training that they need to do their work properly? Will they listen and act on that training and procedures and do the work safely? Will others around them perform and do their work safely and attentively as well? Will they have the courage to step up when they see something being done unsafely? It can take just a moment for a life or lives to be changed forever. For your children, for your employees, for your employer, or a loved one. It is not always top of mind how easily we may find ourselves in situations where those seconds really matter and our lives hang in the balance. When we operate our vehicles, when we're walking down the street, and yes, when we're doing work in any circumstance. We all have the right to a safe workplace, and it is everyone's responsibility to ensure that's provided every day. All of us are here united in our belief that workplace accidents are preventable through the implementation of proven best practices, responsible workplace culture, and actions, whether you're an employer, an employee, a supervisor, or an organization. The goal sounds simple. Everyone goes home safe every day, but the truth is it takes conscious and concerted and repeated effort for all of us to succeed with that goal. Finally, let's take a moment to recommit ourselves today, now, to contributing every day to workplace culture that honors the lessons learned by doing the following. How do we foster mindfulness and preparedness as we undertake our work at the beginning of every day? How do we promote mental and physical health and wellness within our workplace? How do we discourage bravado and shortcuts and risk-taking that increase the risk of injury or death for you or a fellow worker? How do we encourage questions and listen to that voice in the back of our minds that says, is this the safest way to complete the task? Permit yourself to stop if something isn't safe. Even when you're in a hurry, ask a colleague or a manager for guidance. Listen and respond to new ideas that improve the processes and reduce the risks that you may face. Look out for the well-being of yourself, but also for colleagues and staff by implementing, following, and enforcing safety policies, or simply put, speak up when you see something that isn't safe. Provide regular training and opportunities, and demand that you are kept abreast of the latest ways to keep your workplace safe. And consistently check with employees to see if they have concerns or questions with the way that they do their work. One of the things that we do at the Business Council, we start every meeting with a safety share. It's a culture of mindfulness to get you thinking at the start of the day about what you need to do in the event of an emergency or an accident. And it brings your day to light around what you can do for the balance of the day. These are just simple steps that all build habits that we can ingrain in ourselves, but that will save lives, pain, and suffering. So together we have the opportunity to demonstrate this behavior and ingrain it in ourselves and our colleagues. It includes talking to family members, employers, and friends, and educating ourselves to look out for those around us, and to continue to work together to entrench positive, safe work environments that benefit us all. British Columbia's greatest strength, as we all know, are the people that live and work here every day, that go to work, that build our communities, and support our families. Let's make sure everyone gets home safely today and every day from here forward. Thank you for being here, and we appreciate the opportunity to listen to our next speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. D'Avignon. Our next speaker today is Irene Lanzinger, President of the BC Federation of Labour. Irene was elected President of the BC Fed in 2014, previously holding the position of Secretary-Treasurer from 2010 until 2014. She's a longtime union activist and teacher, and the first teacher to assume the top post in a provincial federation of labour. Please welcome Irene Lanzinger.
Thanks so much, Stephen, and thanks to all of you for being here today to pay tribute on this important day for workers. A special thank you to our two speakers, Rosemarie and Jack. They'll speak after me about the impact on their lives of unhealthy and unsafe workplaces. Today I remembered a time when I went up to Prince George a few years ago for an annual general meeting of the United Steelworker Local that's based in Prince George. And I was picked up at the airport by a staff member for the steelworkers. His name is Brian Croy. And during the course of the day, Brian drove me around to the meetings and to various events, and he told me his story. He was in the Lakeland mill when it exploded. He was not a worker in that mill. He was there for a union meeting in the staff room. And his life was saved because he was standing next to the pop machine, and the pop machine shielded him from the explosion. But Brian never recovered from that. He saw two of his co-workers die, two of his members of his local die. And over the years, I talked to a number of workers who were in that mill, as well as the Bains mill. And I experienced firsthand the psychological impact of those events on those people's lives, on the lives of their co-workers and their families. Similarly, the families of the women who died in the van accident that Minister Bains mentioned. Tracy Fan, whose father suffered irreparable brain damage in the mushroom farm incident in Delta. These are the things we remember today. These events got media attention. There were inquests. But there are many workers who die, and it doesn't even make a story in the newspaper because many workers die, too many workers die. Today, on April 28th, we remember each and every one of those workers who have been killed, who have been injured, or become ill because of their work. And there are too many of them. In 2009, 198 workers in British Columbia were reportedly killed on the job or died because of their work. That's nearly 4 workers each week. It's nearly 4 times the number of coffins you see behind the stage today. Of these workers, 71 died due to work-related asbestos exposure, nearly 1/3 of all the fatalities. Additionally, more than 100,000 injuries and illnesses were reported in 2017. These are not just numbers. Each one of these numbers represents a person, like Brian, a worker, a fallen worker with a family, friends, and co-workers who are mourning the loss of their loved one, and surviving dependents needing support to survive the emotional and financial impacts of the loss. The numbers represent workers with disabling work-related injuries or disease, struggling to cope with their health and the financial burden placed on them as a result of inadequacies in the worker compensation system. This is simply unacceptable. We must do more to stop preventable work-related deaths, disabling injuries, and illnesses. We must do more to fulfill our social responsibility to ensure that injured workers are fairly compensated for their injuries or illnesses, and that surviving families of killed workers are taken care of. In 2017, the Me Too campaign has raised significant issues of violence and harassment in our workplaces. Violence including bullying, sexual harassment, sexual violence, gender-based violence, and intimate partner violence should not be part of anyone's experience anywhere, and especially not at work. And yet, for many workers, it is prevalent and simply seen as part of the job. The effects of workplace violence are devastating, leading to physical and psychological injuries and illnesses, and sadly, in some cases, death due to homicide or suicide. This must end. It's time to take serious action against violence, bullying, and harassment in our workplaces. We call upon the government to recognize this by naming workplace violence as a hazard in the Workers' Compensation Act, and ensuring that the definition is inclusive of the full spectrum of violence experienced in our workplaces, including bullying, harassment, sexual harassment and violence, and intimate partner violence. On behalf of the BC Federation of Labour, representing more than 500,000 unionized workers, I would like to share our heartfelt condolences to the families, friends, and co-workers of all the workers killed because of their work. We share in your mourning. But we recognize that mourning is not enough. The National Day of Mourning is also our collective call to action. It's a day to recommit, to increase our efforts to improve health and safety in the workplace, to ensure that workers are actively participating in every aspect of these efforts, to rigorously enforce occupational health and safety regulations, and to hold those who violate them accountable, and to preserve the dignity of the thousands of workers who suffer injury or illness, ensuring full compensation and the return to meaningful family-supporting work. It's time to put workers back into our workers' compensation system. We mourn for the dead, and we commit to continue to fight for the living. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. Our final two speakers today have experienced life-changing loss due to workplace tragedies. The first of these speakers is Jack Thomas. An avid drummer and aspiring musician, Jack was just 17 when he lost his arm in a workplace injury at a recycling facility. Undaunted, Jack continued to pursue his career in music and hopes that telling his story will help make safety a #1 priority in workplaces. Jack, please come forward.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's quite a beautiful event, and I'm honored to be here along with all these fellow speakers up here on this stage to speak about a huge pending topic, something that's been an issue for years upon years, that is going to be continuously an issue unless we put a stop to it. Today is really special to me, and I feel honored to be a part of it because at a time in life right now where the world doesn't have too much peace and love, we can come together like this and spread a little bit more love and show that we do have the potential to change the world and make the world a better place for the future of our children. I come from a small drive-through town, Port Coquitlam. Nothing too much to do there, so pretty much just get up to no good with my friends. But when I wasn't doing that, I really wanted to find something that I really could set my life towards, something that I could find, something that I could love, do for the rest of my life. And that was music. From a young age, I really wanted to do something with my friends. You know, we all had our own instrument that we played. Me and a few other friends played guitar and bass, but none of us could find a drummer. I was the best of the worst, which was inconvenient because you could throw a trash can down a hallway and get a better drummer than I was at the time. But of course, with lots of practice, I managed to get myself to a place where I was able to keep a beat, which was unbelievable. I remember talking to my mom about wanting to become a drummer. I'd been playing the bass guitar for just about 3 years, and I told her, hey, we really need a drummer, and I'm looking to buy a drum kit. What can we do? So we went to the music store, and we looked about our options, and we found a drum kit, something that was about $800. And at the time, I was 13, so $800 was something that I never thought I would have in my pocket. If I had $8, I was rich. So she told me, look, I will buy this drum kit for you right now. I'll front it to you. And if you get a job and if you pay off this drum kit, then it's yours, then you can keep it. I was thrilled. I had been working a paper route for about 1.5 years at that point, so for the next few years I paid off that drum kit by delivering papers in rain, shine, snow, hurricane, tornado, whatever it might be. Those papers needed to be delivered. And what that paper route taught me was 2 things. 1, I hate delivering papers. And the second thing was the sense of accomplishment and how good it feels to pay for something and own it. Playing those drums while I was paying it off was amazing. It was my favorite thing to do. I would do it for 4 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I remember the day that I paid off those drums, something was different. I was playing and I felt more powerful. I felt like I was doing something different. And then I realized it's because these drums now officially belong to only me. I have worked hard to pay for these. These are now in my possession. That paper route taught me how good it feels to work hard for what you have. That's how I was raised for my entire life from my mom. She taught me that if I want something in life, I need to strive my hardest to get there. I need to work 125% to my potential to achieve that goal. So I quit my paper route as soon as I possibly could and started working in a restaurant. And from there, I had a few other jobs, scrapping at construction sites, this and that, here and there. And then came my most recent job, which was a recycling job at a drywall dump. I got this job as a summer job in July of 2015. I was really excited because at the age of 17, they told me I'd be getting $13.75 an hour, and so I thought that I was going to be Rockefeller for all my friends. Now at the age of 20, I realized $13.75 an hour is not too much De Niro in the pocket, but so be it. At the age of 17, that was amazing because what I wanted to do was save up to go to my dream post-secondary school of Nimbus School of Recording and Media. I wanted to become a music producer, an audio engineer, a guy that could both perform and record at the same time. This was something that was going to be very difficult financially, seeing as I didn't have a job. So to have a $13.75 an hour full-time job in the summer that they were offering to let me keep as a part-time job through my 12th grade year, that was incredible. All I wanted to do was maintain this job and impress everybody. I remember one of the first shifts that I had, they showed me something that would ultimately be one of the worst things they'd ever taught me. They taught me how to do something that I thought was just part of the workplace. I remember that very first day thinking to myself, this is ridiculously unsafe. And that was the last time I thought this was ridiculously unsafe. On September 4th, 2015, I showed up to my shift like any other day. I came back from a 3-day camping trip, so my shift and position where I was working was a little bit messy. The job that I had to do at the workplace was to sort through scrap drywall, going on a conveyor belt, sort out anything that wasn't drywall, scrap metal, pieces of garbage, throw it out so that it can properly go into the recycling process without having any issues. The position that I was standing in was right in front of a flat conveyor belt. To the left of this flat conveyor belt was what's called a sorter. This big sorter was kind of a chained conveyor belt that when drywall was dumped on, it would slowly disperse it onto the belt that I was standing at to sort it through. Once it was gone through the sorting belt, it would go up to the distribution belt. It was about a 50-foot tall belt that went from where I was up to the top, and that's when it went through a grinder and it went through the rest of the recycling process. This monstrous machine was terrible. It was so old, it was rugged, it was run down. It was operated by 3 switches. Each switch controlled a different part of the belt. However, if the main belt was shut off, all the other belts would also shut off, but they'd still have power to them. So it was enforced that if we were working anywhere near the belts, all switches need to be turned off, and that was something that I drilled into my head from day one. One of the biggest issues with this machine was the distribution belt was too narrow for the rollers that it was on. A common thing that would happen is the belt would track back and forth, left and right, and what this would do would make the drywall fall off either side, making a huge mess underneath. And considering that this is a continuous process, drywall going on it all day, in a matter of 10 minutes, if you don't clean it up, it's going to be a 6-foot high pile that's going to be a nightmare to clean up. Any downtime that we managed to get, we would shut off all 3 switches, go and sweep up the mess that the belt made from all the drywall falling off, turn the machine back on and get back to work. What we would commonly do, and this is the thing that I was trained on my very first day, would to take the scrap stripping of metal that came from the corners of walls and scrap drywall and to stick it in the roller, between the roller and the belt itself. What this would do is it would create tension in the belt so the belt wouldn't move back and forth. This would increase our productivity. We wouldn't have to keep turning the machine off and on, and we'd be able to just stand there and keep doing our job. What would happen sometimes as a safety feature on the belt, if something is jammed inside with the roller, if it's feeling too much tension, it will shut off and it won't turn on. This would happen quite a bit if people put too much metal in there. The metal would start to get squished, so people would start feeding more and more and more in there until the point where it couldn't move anymore. I came back from my camping trip and it was a nightmare, an absolute mess. Everything was sideways, there was piles of drywall where I didn't think piles of drywall could even get to, and the belt wasn't working properly. I shut it off to do some maintenance like any other day, and when I went to go turn it back on, it wouldn't turn on. I looked underneath and I, of course, expected what I saw, and it was a congealed mess of metal spaghetti that was tangled up in the conveyor belt roller. I did what I was trained to do in removing the metal with the machine off, making sure that everything was safe. I cleaned up around the area first, and then the next thing I knew, the machine turned on. My hand was stuck underneath the conveyor belts, and I didn't really feel worried at first. I didn't think anything of it. Fairly easygoing guy, so I thought, well, I'm gonna get myself out of this now. All right, sweet. And then I was waking up on the ground. Now, this job was incredibly boring. I enjoyed working for it because it made good money in my pocket, but 8 hours a day standing at a loud conveyor belt sorting through drywall, I got quite tired. I thought I might fall asleep on the job more than a handful of times, so initially when waking up, I thought, oh my God, I'm so fired, because I couldn't quite remember what was going on. When I started to come to, I remember my hand was just stuck. Something told me right then not to look down. I knew whatever it was going to be bad. And if it was bad, I wouldn't be able to go get help. I had no radio. I was by myself, no one around to see what happened. So I got myself up and I ran outside. It was about 150 meters. I ran straight, I took a left, I took a right, and I was outside. On that run, I ran past one of my coworkers. He was driving a big John Deere front-end loader, and the look on his face is embedded in my head to this day. He drained in color in a cartoon-like form. He went completely white and his jaw hit the floor, and that's when I knew something was seriously wrong. As soon as I got outside, I yelled for help, laid myself down, closed my eyes, and stuck my hand in the air, asking somebody to grab it. I remember the two people that came and helped me right away. I don't remember what they looked like, only what they sound like. Sabjeet and Diane. Diane was initially working on my arm. She was getting ready to bandage it up, and Sabjeet was holding my hand. I didn't know that my arm was missing at that moment, so I asked him what his name was, introduced myself, asked how his day was going, just tried to have a casual conversation. And then I started to realize I couldn't quite feel my arm. It was numb. I didn't know what was going on. I thought maybe my arm was gone. So I asked him. I said, Sabjeet, you got to tell me, is my arm there? And he hesitated for just a brief second. And that was enough to tell me that my arm was missing. So I asked him again, please. And he told me verbatim, I'm sorry, buddy, but your arm is gone. 17 years old, a drummer, a musician, someone who wanted their life to be a performer. And now I thought that the rest of my life was over. Thankfully, I was very close to a hospital, Royal Columbian Hospital in New Westminster. The paramedics were there in less than a minute, it felt like, and I heard them start calling in what was going on. They said, dislocated shoulder, arm severed at the elbow. I clarified, I asked, I'm sorry, did you say arm severed at the elbow? And he said, yes. I asked, do I still have my shoulder? He's like, yes, from your shoulder to the elbow, you still have. And for some reason, that was A-okay with me. Right there, laying on the ground, I started to think, all right, I can do this. I can drum. I can get my life back on track. I started thinking of one of my favorite songs, Tommy the Cat by the band Primus, and I thought, how can I drum this? And I start air drumming right there, bleeding out in lots of pain, just thinking about drumming. I went into surgery for 4 hours to attempt to reattach my arm, and of course, it wasn't successful. In case it wasn't obvious, this is not real. I was in the hospital for 6 days afterwards. They discharged me because I was doing so well, because I had so many visitors and so much love and support from my friends and family that I was able to go to GF Strong Rehabilitation Center to relearn how to relive my life, relearn how to get everything back on track and live just with my non-dominant hand. After just under a month of being there, I was able to go back to school, start my 12th grade year, and pass on time, graduate with my class with mostly A's and B's. Since then, thank you. Since then, I've started and been at my dream school, Nimbus School of Recording and Media, as an audio engineer and producer. I've just received my 3rd diploma in music media production, and come this August will be my last and 4th diploma in live sound. By the time I'm done, I'm hoping to have a career in music and anywhere. And I'm very happy to be in the position that I am today, but what would make me happier is if I was able to get here with 2 arms. I am damaged physically by this like to no end. The pain is constant, the pain is sharp, and it's not ever going to go away. Physically and mentally, this has damaged me to no end. But the people that has damaged the most is my family. If you're a parent out there, I want you to be put in my mom's shoes. Just picture this for a little bit. Seeing your 17-year-old son go to work, and then 7 hours later getting a call from the hospital saying, "You need to get here right now, it's your son Jack and it's bad." If you're not a parent, imagine your brother or sister now. Imagine being in my brother and sister's shoes, hearing from my mom saying Jack is in the hospital. And now I want you to imagine any family member racing to the hospital and not knowing if they're even alive. Thankfully for my mom and my family, they found out that I was alive and that I was still breathing. Unfortunately for people like Rosemarie, you find out otherwise. This is a phone call that nobody should ever have to get. Nobody should ever have to find out that a loved one has been injured in a workplace and you have no idea whether or not they're even alive until you get to the hospital. This constant stigma of workers always needing to do what they're told to get paid needs to end. As a young worker at the age of 17, all I wanted to do was impress my coworkers, impress my boss. I needed this job to go to my dream school. I needed the money. I would do anything to make sure that I could maintain this job. I thought on the very first day, and only the first day, that the very act that got my arm torn off was unsafe, and I didn't think about it afterwards. I didn't think about it because I was 17 and had been working there for only 3 months. Everybody else had been working there for years. I felt I was on the bottom of the totem pole, and I was enforced. I was almost told that I was on the bottom of the totem pole. Young workers and any worker aside, there's this idea that if you don't do what you're told, you'll be fired on the spot because there's other people. We as employers need to end the constant thought that you need to be working constantly and that you can't put your safety first. And as employers, we need to tell our employees that it's okay to not do something if it's not safe. We need to make it more obvious in the workplace to talk about the most safe ways to do things. And we need to make it okay for any age of worker to go up to the boss and say, "This is ridiculous, we need to get this changed." One of the things that irks me the most about my accident is the fact that this could have been prevented in so many ways, mainly if we had changed the main distribution conveyor belt. If it was the proper size, it wouldn't track back and forth. And they had the proper size belt sitting outside all the time, and we had asked our employer countless times if we could change the belt. The reasoning for not changing the belt was that the belt that was on there wasn't worn down enough. They wanted to save money. They had already bought the belt, but they didn't want to change it yet. And instead, I got my arm ripped off. We all need to come together and realize that this is something that can end. It's not going to be an easy process, but if we start enforcing more love and respect in the workplace, if we start helping out one another and looking out for each other and not thinking that working is the only thing you need to do, then we can put an end to this. There's no reason we should be putting our lives at risk to make a living. That's an oxymoron in itself. Why would you want to put yourself in a position where you could die because you're trying to live? This stigma needs to end, and an event like this can help that. I'm honored to be speaking here today. I wish I could be speaking here with 2 arms, but the fact of the matter is I'm living proof that there is problems in the workplace. I am living proof that this can happen to you. I thought that this couldn't happen to me because I was a young kid. I was ignorant. I didn't think anything of it. Yet here I am, breathing, thankfully, but at what cost? We can put an end to this. We can spread love. we can save lives and we can get to the point where there's no deaths in a workplace. I'd like to thank all my fellow speakers up here. We're about to hear from Rosemarie, and I'm very excited to see what she has to say. Thank you, everybody, for coming out despite the rain. Have a lovely day.
Thank you, Jack. Our final speaker also has a personal story to tell. Rosemarie Lachnit is a family survivor. Her son Nicholas died while working on a Surrey condominium construction site in 2005 at the age of 20. Rosemarie shares her painful story to help avoid other such tragedies and has traveled from her hometown of Whitehorse, to speak here today and honor BC workers who have lost their lives in their workplaces. Rosemarie, please come forward.
Hello, my name is Rosemarie Lachnit, and I know firsthand what it means when a loved one dies at work. That's why I'm here from Whitehorse today, where I was a single mother and raised my only child, Nicholas, until he was 20 when he left the Yukon for the big city life. My son had a bubbly personality, a catalyst for getting kids doing stuff. These were friends Nicholas knew most of his life, and they were close. He was mischievous and loved to argue. If you said one thing, he'd pick the other side and stick with it to the end, always with the most awesome smile. I didn't appreciate how great his smile was until he died. That's also when I realized how really close we were. We had more than a mother-son relationship. For us, it was a deep friendship. Nicholas was my best friend. His leaving home to come south wasn't easy for me. Still, I knew he wasn't alone, but was sharing an apartment with a friend he'd had since grade 2. Nicholas wasn't afraid of work, and within weeks, the end of November, had a good construction job in Surrey, I thought. On January 6th, 2005, my co-worker said I had a message from a friend of my son about him being in hospital. And I knew immediately this was bad. If he could do it himself, Nicholas would have never have let anybody else make that call. The longest 12 hours of my life were those between the phone call to the hospital and finally arriving in Vancouver. By then I knew what had happened. Nicholas was installing siding on a condominium construction site when he fell 3 stories from an unguarded balcony. He landed headfirst on a pipe sticking out of the ground. When I got to the hospital at 1 the next morning, seeing Nicholas was devastating. He had 2 black eyes, tubes coming out of his face, and the head wound was still bleeding. Nicholas died of his brain injury at 7:30 that night. Just before he slipped away, I was holding his hand and said, "You can go. It's all right. I'll be okay." His arm moved then. It felt like he was acknowledging what I had told him. The irony is that Nicholas intended to move back to Whitehorse. After he died, his friends told me he found the Vancouver area to be just too big. Now I was going home alone. 3 weeks later, we had a memorial at the school Nicholas went to. His friends and I also built a memorial bench for him. The kids signed and put their hands in the wet concrete. Nicholas died 13 years ago, and it doesn't seem that long. Initially, he was on my mind constantly, and I still think of him every day. Some days are harder than others, and I haven't really come to grips with what happened. The beginning was the worst. No one I talked to actually understood my pain. It's different now for grieving families since WorkSafeBC started a family peer support program in 2009, and I'm a volunteer, lending an ear and helping others deal with the awful truth we share. What happened to my son was stupid and unnecessary. It was the second incident like this on his job site in 2 months. The company my son was working for had no fall protection plan in place. He was not instructed to wear fall protection. Before Nicholas started working for this company, he was given a list of supplies he needed to work there: a hard hat, safety glasses, steel-toed boots, measuring tape, framing hammer. A full body harness was not on that list. I would have supplied it if he needed it. A full body harness, lanyard, anchor at a cost of about $300 would have saved my son's life. After Nicholas was killed, the contractor and subcontractor were fined less than $50,000. The people who shared Nick's life paid a much higher price. My biggest fear now is that Nicholas died in vain, that his loss won't help prevent others, which is what I want. We still need to do more to prevent incidents like the one suffered by my son. It's the eager to please young people who need to be more aware of the potential dangers in the workplace. We need to educate our young workers about safety on the job sites. I believe that everyone needs to do more to stop young workers from losing their lives. Employers need to take responsibility for the safety of their workers, especially young workers. We need to remind these young workers that they have rights to say no and question the employer if they feel unsure about the safety of their work environment. Workers need to take some responsibility for their own safety, exercising legal rights to refuse work they think is dangerous. Construction workers should be fully trained with their tools and equipment, always checking to make sure that they are in good working order. Construction workers, all workers, need to follow safety rules. A first aid attendant must be on site. All we need to help get the message out. We all need to help get the message out. The losing your life is easy, too easy. It's never worth putting your life at risk on the job because you may lose it. I know my life will never be the same because my son did so. We must protect our sons and daughters. We must end the need for the day of mourning. Employers, workers, and families, everyone here today must fight every day to see that no more children are lost. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosemarie, for being here today and sharing your story with us. Our sincere thanks to all of the families who have come here today to observe the ceremony with us. We appreciate your willingness to attend. Thanks as well to Ralph, Greg, Irene, Jack, and Rosemarie for your words, and to all of you for being here today for our ceremony. Let's remember what we heard today from all of our speakers and translate that into action in our workplaces and in our lives. To, as Rosemarie said, hopefully one day make the day of mourning unnecessary. In a moment, we will observe our moment of silence in memory of those who were killed on the job last year. Our silence period will end with the blowing of whistles from tugboats, which are joining us today from the water, courtesy of ILWU Local 400. And then as you hear the bagpipes begin to play, the Honor Guard, which is comprised of members of the Vancouver Fire and Rescue Honor Guard and the BC Ambulance Paramedic Honor Guard, will make their way past you toward the line of work. We ask that the families please come forward first and follow behind our Honor Guard and the Piper. Then the rest of us will follow directly behind you. Roses will be distributed, and you may choose to leave these on the coffins or along the line of work, or to take them home with you. I would also like to remind the families that there is a family room located in the VCEC building in West Meeting Room 201, straight up the ramp to the right of the Jack Poole Plaza entrance. VCEC staff will be on hand to direct people. This will conclude our ceremony. Again, thank you for observing this remembrance with us, and now I ask you to join us for a short period of silence.